from a man who introduced himself to me saying that he had been a naval flight engineer from 1977 to 1997, a 20-year career, of which a good part of it he was stationed with other naval people in McMurdo, the American base in Antarctica. And he remembered that around 1995 to 1997, that he and the crew would be in a big C-130, maybe a crew of 15, 17 people. And they often would have assignments where they would have to go from McMurdo, say, up to Pole, and then maybe over to the Australian camp at Davis on the east side of Antarctica, and that they would have navigation going to Pole, and when they went to Pole, that meant that they would have to cross over the trans-Antarctic mountains that go completely across, almost dividing the big continent of Antarctica. Well, as they would fly toward the pole, they would get to the same place every time, called the Beardmore Glacier. And half a dozen different times, they all saw this. There would be silver, glinting, circular craft. They would come up over the trans-Antarctic mountains. They would never cross over into the Beardmore Glacier. Almost they began to wonder, is there some territorial constriction here? But they would be in their C-130 and they would see the silver discs come together in pairs, stop midair, one take off, another go up, go down. But those silver discs never came toward the C-130, and they all began to notice as a crew that they never flew over that Beardmore Glacier, and they would joke and talk among each other. Well, what do you think we've got here? These UFOs, are these extraterrestrials, and is somebody keeping them on that side of the Beardmore Glacier like a joke? But there came a moment in 95 to 97 where they got a call. It was a medvac, and it was somebody over in the Davis camp on the Australian far eastern side that had gotten severe burns from some kind of a kitchen cooking explosion. And it was very serious, and they knew that they normally would have a 5.5 hour to 6 hour flight. And they wanted to see if they could cut down that time because of the emergency. And the captain had talked with the crew and said, does anybody understand why we have this no-fly zone about 5 miles away from Pole? That's going to eat up more time. Is there any reason why we can't go through that no-fly zone? And the answer that came back was, it's supposed to be an air monitoring station within 5 miles of the South Pole. And the captain said, we're flying at 35,000 feet. We're not going to be contaminating air down there. This guy over here is in an emergency situation. Let's just go through this no-fly zone. All of the crew is looking down the window, and the man who has contacted me about all of this, that I call Brian S., said, to their astonishment, when they are so close to what would be the South Pole in this no-fly zone, he said it was like a perfect sort of circle hole. And it seemed to have a slant going into it, like this was constructed. But he said the size, they all said it must be the size of a football field, which would be 300 feet in diameter, clearly going down into the ice. Well, when they got to Davis and they picked up their medical person and got it back to McMurdo, when they landed, they said there was a man in a suit. And that doesn't happen in Antarctica unless it's CIA, NSA, DIA, NRO, Intel, or counter-intel. And they are taken together as a crew, and they are said, the man said to them, what you saw at Pole, you did not see. Not now, not ever. You do not talk about that hole. And Brian told me there had been rumors, but the rumors really began to increase between 1995 to 1997, people sitting down at bars or in cafeterias. Under the ice near the South Pole was what people said. Did you know that we've got extraterrestrials that are collaborating with our government and they're down there in that hole? That was the kind of talk. Well, they got an assignment not too long after seeing that big hole, that a group of National Science Foundation people were coming in from the United States, about 15 of them, and their job would be to get these scientists into that C-130, get them to where they were going to do the research, which in this case was Marie Byrd Land on kind of northwest of McMurdo. And they were always used to flying National Science Foundation people in, usually between September and February, which is the summer months in Antarctica, and it was this period of time around 1996. And they picked up these scientists, an awful lot of gear, took them to where they were going to do this research, dropped them off, and Brian said the agreement with scientists was, you call every 24-hour period to this number that they had in McMurdo so that we know that you're okay, that there's no medical emergencies or a problem. And he said they got back, and by the 5th, 6th, 7th day, they had not heard anything from these scientists. And then they get the order, something's wrong. So now they go back. And he said when they were approaching, they went in a big circle, going all around the camp, getting lower and lower with the idea that if there was anything moving, people, dogs, sleds, anything, that they would see it either high and then come down low. Nothing. Literally nothing was moving. They landed, they checked everything out, there was nobody there. It was a huge mystery. They went back to McMurdo. Everybody is puzzled. And another week later after that, they get the phone call, same crew, the scientists are back. Get the plane over there. We got to get them out. And the guys on the plane are expecting that these National Science Foundation researchers are going to be with, clapping their hands and jumping up and down, and whatever they're going to hear about whatever had happened. And they land. And he said the scientists were just lined up perfectly still. They get ushered onto the plane. They're looking down on the ground. There's not a single word, not to anybody. And the crew are looking at each other, and one of them said, they look traumatized. And they had all of this gear, but the decision apparently was that they would get the scientists out first and get the gear in another flight. So they get these, he thought there were 2 women and the rest men. And he said, Linda, it was so eerie. They've been missing for 2 weeks. And he said they looked scared, they didn't talk to each other, they didn't talk to us, and they kept looking at the ground. And one of the male scientists sat on a chair, and Brian S. was sitting on a jump seat that was looking back at the scientists. And this one man who sat down, he said it was close enough for me to lean over, and he said, I just extended my hand, and I said, is there anything that I can get you? And that the scientist never responded, kept staring at the floor. The plane landed in McMurdo. The scientists were whisked away immediately. They went on another plane, and they heard that they went to Christchurch in New Zealand, never to be seen by this crew again. And then when they were in the cafeteria talking, the words were from somebody who had some association with what those scientists had been doing, said, yeah, the rumor is that they came here to work with what we call extraterrestrial biological entities down in that hole site near Pole. And